thank you, everybody. We've had Rados, and we've had Indiana, and now it's me. So don't go away. We're going to talk about teaching C2 proficiency, fearless in the face of excellence. So, yes, I saw a question in the chat there. I'm in Seville, in Spain, and I'm the Director of Studies of a large group of language schools called ELI. I'm a teacher and a teacher trainer. So, what are we going to do in the next 30 minutes? We're going to talk a little bit about why C2 is different, the actual exam itself. A couple of things are different, and the type of student and the type of teacher we need to be. Then we're going to talk about the importance of learner autonomy at C2. Obviously, it's important at previous levels, but C2 particularly, I think, because there's a world of language that they need to come across. And finally, C2 speaking and writing classroom activities. So activities that I've tried out in my classes, and hopefully they will be useful to you, and hopefully are easily adaptable. If you don't teach C2, if you teach C1 or B2, you can hopefully adapt these activities easily enough. So, why is C2 different? Well, let me give you, first of all, a few fun facts about the exam C2 proficiency. It first started in 1913. That was the first time it was taken. It was taken by 3 students who all wanted to be English language teachers. It cost £3. And it lasted 12 hours. So there were 12 hours of a proficiency exam in 1913. Here is the actual overview of the written and the oral exam itself. You can see the 12 hours there. You can count them up on that side if you want to. There was some translation, there was some literature, and some phonetics. There you have the exam itself. And if you're wondering about those 3 students who took that first exam, well, unfortunately, they all failed. Never mind. C2 in 2024 is very different. Thankfully, it does not last for 12 hours. It's only about 4 hours long. So that's a relief. There are a couple of tasks which are different, which if you go into a C2 class, your students might not have come across. For example, speaking part 3 is a 2-minute individual long-term task. Here's an example. Students are given a question with some bullet points, 3 bullet points that they can use in their answer or not. It doesn't matter if they do or if they don't, but they have to talk for 2 minutes about that question. The other task that your students most probably won't have done is in the writing. Writing part 1 involves summary and evaluation of 2 texts of 100 words. This is the obligatory part 1 writing. There's no choice. Here's an example. You've got both texts on the same subject, negotiation, but they give different points of view. And the students have to summarize and evaluate the 2 texts. I'll look at both the speaking 2-minute task and this task later on. We'll have some ideas on how to teach them. I called this C2 fearless in the face of excellence. Fearless in the face of what excellence? Well, student excellence. In my experience, I first started teaching proficiency about 15, 16 years ago. And in my experience, my students have been from age 16 upwards, right through all the ages, and they are learning machines. C2 students are usually very accustomed to being in a language classroom. They have seen all of the exam technique usually before. They know how to spot a distractor in a reading or in a listening. They are language learning machines, and they're usually really good. They are also, I find in my experience, intrinsically motivated. So that helps us a lot in the class. It means that their motivation to be there comes from them because they've reached such a high level. Nobody's forcing them to be in the class. That can happen with adolescents. How does that affect us as teachers in the face of this excellence? Well, I think, firstly, we need to be unafraid to say, I don't know. If you imagine a C2 student says to you in class, can you tell me all the different uses of the subjunctive in English with example sentences, please? We need to be, as teachers, unworried. I'm afraid I don't know, but I'll find out and I'll have an answer for you next class. Our role as teachers with C2 does not need to be the font of all knowledge. We don't need to know everything. Very often the students are right. So don't be worried about saying, I don't know, I'll find out. Also, one huge tip I have, never go into a proficiency class without the teacher's book. Take the teacher's book under your arm wherever you go near a proficiency class. If you can imagine you're doing a reading comprehension and a student asks you, why is option C correct and option D is wrong? Now, I know that to read through that C2 level text and those multiple choice answers, C or D, it would take me quite a while to find the answer why. But if you take the teacher's book with you, that's all you need. The answer's there for you and you can have it ready prepared. So keep hold of that teacher's book. It's really useful. We're going to talk a little bit about the role of the teacher then in a C2 class. I've got a quote here from Thomas Carruthers, who's an educational theorist. A teacher is one who makes them, her, himself progressively. Now there's an adjective that's coming now. Would you like to guess in the chat, what is that adjective that I've blocked out? Can you give me a guess in the chat? See if anyone gets it right. Oh, wow, you're quick. Oh, yes. Anna says curious. It was Patrick said unnecessary, and Hara said that. Let's just have a look. Wow, you're very quick. Yes, the answer is progressively unnecessary. Thank you for writing your answers there and having a go at that. So in which case, if we're making ourselves unnecessary at C2, what is our role? And I'd like to suggest that at C2, the role of the teacher is more a facilitator. We're trying to facilitate their learning. We are not the people who know everything in the class. We're the ones who are helping them. We can't give them a list of all the words for proficiency C2. It doesn't exist because there are too many of them. So we facilitate their learning and encourage them to learn autonomously, which brings me to my next point, the importance of learner autonomy at C2. Let me show you some examples of why I think this is important and how we can encourage our students to be autonomous in the face of all the language that they have to learn at C2. First thing I like to do is encourage my students to keep a language learning journal. It could be a physical journal that they write in, or it could be, this is an iPhone app of a journal that you can see there. And it's a private document. It's something they keep throughout the course, and it's for themselves, for reflection and autonomous learning. They could write things, for example, like, one thing about use of English that I've learned today. It could be that. Or it could be, one question or issue I found challenging. And then a week later, or 2 weeks later, they can go back to that challenging issue and read about it and say, oh, okay, no, that's not an issue anymore. I know what that is. Or they could just write, I need to work on. What they're doing is setting their own language learning goals in that way, being autonomous. Another way I like to teach C2 to become autonomous is to use the enormous amount of text that we have in the course book. in a different way than just the exam task that they have. You can get so much language lexis out of them. For example, telling them to make different lists between productive and receptive vocabulary. Productive for speaking and writing, receptive that they're just going to have to recognize in reading and listening. And we get that vocabulary from the texts in the book. This is an example of a multiple choice closed test taken from Ready for C2. And I don't know about you, but in class, I find when we go over the answers to this type of exercise, there's never enough time to really explore all of that vocabulary there. So I do an exercise with my students in class, which I'm going to show you now, to try and work on this vocabulary, and then to encourage them to go home and do the same thing by themselves. So these are the columns of the words. I have A, B, C, and D. My students are in 4 different groups. Each group has a column of 8 words. Each group works together to analyze the words. What comes after it? What does it collocate with? Is there any specific grammar? And don't forget that these words are all out of context. So some of them have an enormous amount of collocations or different meanings. So they explore their 8 words. Then I get them to regroup 1A, 1B, 1C, and 1D together. And they share. So it's not me talking in the class and telling them the answers. They are sharing their knowledge of those words. And then they take notes on the information that was useful that they're giving each other. And then they choose which collocations will be the most useful personally for them, and they write them down. And then they know that they can and should go and do this type of activity autonomously with all of the text that we use in class, hopefully. Similarly, working with texts, I like to work on synonyms with students. So here's something I'm going to ask you to do if you're ready. This is a short text. You don't need to worry about reading it, but I'm going to show you a synonym of one adjective in that text. And I'd like you please to write in the chat, what is the original in the text? So this is the synonym. Can you find the original and write it in the chat? Let's see. Anybody found the original? Oh, wow. Patrick, you got it right before. Catherine, thank you. Yes, God, you're all amazing. Yes, wow. That was so quick. Yes. Unclear, the word in the text is nebulous, right there in the middle of the text. So usually I do this activity, very simple, with mini whiteboards, and my students are working in pairs and they write down the original word and hold it up in class. And it's the first one to hold it up that gets 10 points or 100 points if I'm feeling generous. So working with texts in this way. You can also do something a little different after you've done a reading text. Also, you can do this with audio scripts from the listening, exploring the language. Let me show you what I mean. I put up around the classroom 4 pieces of paper with 4 different types of collocation. Okay, so noun plus noun, verb plus noun. When we finished doing the reading text or the listening, what we do then is students work to go back through the text and they find examples of the different types of collocation. Here's an example, jumps there. Here's an example of what my students found. You can see that they found in the particular text that we were working from a load of adjective plus noun collocations, but they didn't really find any verb plus noun, adverb plus verb, but they did add verb plus adverb. They added a new category themselves because they saw lots of examples. Yeah? So you can do this working on the language from the text with paper. the way I did it, sticking it round the wall. Or if you are more technologically minded, you might want to do the same thing on a tool called Padlet, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, padlet.com. Here you can see I've done exactly the same thing as the pieces of paper. I've put up the types of collocation, noun plus noun, adjective plus noun, and students get the link to the Padlet and they type in on their phones, they type in the collocations that they've found. There is no reason you can't do this on paper, but you can do it online if you want. Doing it online on a Padlet is actually quite good because you can build up various texts worth of collocations and you can create big long lists for everyone to share. And then taking all of this world of language that they've just found out from the text, I asked them to actively choose which they'd like to use during the lesson that day. They tell their partner what they're going to use, and then they listen out for each other's collocations and see if they actually manage to use them. C2 speaking and writing classroom activities. So let's have a look, first of all, at speaking classroom activities. If we take part 1 of the speaking exam, now I'm a C2 speaking examiner, and I know this from examining, and I know it from my own students. The part 1 questions are never going to be about super polemic subjects. They're always going to be rather banal, rather boring topic areas, because they have to be, and they are going to be about questions that are very similar to what my students answered at C1 and probably even B2 as well. They've spent years answering these similar questions. And the problem is that sometimes they have mistakes that they've been making for years as well. And these mistakes, fossilized errors, are really difficult to iron out, to get rid of. So I found that doing this, it might be a way of doing it. It's worked for my students, getting rid of those fossilized errors for part 1. And that is to get your students to download any free speech-to-text app on their phone. Okay, and then what they do is they record themselves answering part 1. So they answer those typical questions that they're making mistakes with, and they don't really even realize they're making mistakes. Their speech is transcribed to text, and then it's so much easier and quicker to spot those mistakes, those fossilized errors. They can see them in this transcribed speech that they've got, and they can self-correct. So that really does help improve their part 1 answers to questions at C2 level. Before, I mentioned C2 speaking part 3, which is where they have to talk for 2 minutes answering a question using the prompts if they want to or not. Now, I find a way that students can look at whether they're improving or not is to do something like this that you might want to do during the course. If my course starts in November, I ask my students to record themselves doing the 2-minute monologue task in November. They record themselves. Then halfway through the course in February, I ask them to record themselves again, doing the same task type, but obviously a different question. And then when the course ends in May, I ask them to do it again. What they're doing is recording themselves as many times as you or they decide to during the course, for however long the course is. But the important part comes at the end, because you've built a speaking portfolio of work. And then the students can go home, and part of their work at home is to analyze how they sound. They listen to themselves. How have I improved? Do I sound more confident? Am I more intelligible? You can choose any categories to analyze. Is my pronunciation better? Discourse management. How am I putting together sentences to make them sound coherent? You can choose any category you want for them to listen and analyze themselves in this speaking portfolio, which is a really useful way to develop and get up to C2 level in this particular task. So moving on to C2 writing and classroom activities for writing, I find that one of the most important skills to teach and work on with C2 level is paraphrasing, working on how to say the same thing in a different way. It's relevant to the speaking exam, but particularly to the writing exam. So I like to do some activities with my students in class to work on paraphrasing. And let me show you some of the things that I do. We saw this text before. Remember, the word was nebulous. And we were working just at synonym word level. So you can take that one step further and work on paraphrasing entire phrases from a text. So what I do is I choose a phrase in the text, and then I create a paraphrase of it. Actually, I don't usually create paraphrase myself. I ask AI to do it because it's much easier than having to think of it myself. I put it into ChatGPT and that does it for me. So I'm not going to ask you to do this, but I'm going to show you. This is the paraphrase here. Okay. And I ask my students to look for the original phrase in the text. Here it is. After we've done this, we then look at the language. So we look in the original, it says key indicators. And in the paraphrase, it says crucial pointers. So we discuss which one they like, which one they found most useful of those different expressions. Once you've done this, students can create their own paraphrases for each other in class, not using AI. Talking about AI, you can have some great fun with C2 competitions versus C2 versus AI, the machine versus the machine. So let me show you what I mean. Take any sentence. It doesn't need to be a super complicated sentence. This one is quite simple. The business has been bought by them. It's present perfect passive. Okay, so I put this sentence into ChatGPT and I ask it to give me 10 paraphrases of the same sentence. And then in class, I say to my students, I'd like you to try and predict what ChatGPT, those 10 different ways of saying that sentence, I'd like you to predict. And for every sentence that you come up with that's the same as ChatGPT, you can have 10 points or 100 points. So let's have a go at just doing one. Can you think, please, and put in the chat, I'm going to give you a clue in a minute, of one way that ChatGPT paraphrased that sentence that you can see. Can you try? You want a clue? Here's a clue. There's the first part of it. So let's see what you can come up with and see if anyone's going to. Okay, thank you very much there. We've got purchased from William, and Fabiola has got, yeah, has been purchased. Okay, yeah. So it is good to see the clue because that helps. Remember, you only have to do one. There's a maximum of 10 points at stake here. Wow, thank you. Yes, you've got acquire, the acquisition was finalized. Hilary, thank you. So let's see then, who got 10 points? These are the 10 sentences that ChatGPT produced. Yeah, hopefully you got 10 points, maybe you got more. But then after we've done that competition in class, which is enjoyable, then what we do is the work, which is choose the phrase which will be most useful for you and use it or them in your next essay. So for example, with these particular sentences, number 7, my students thought that was really boring, not particularly useful. They didn't like it. Okay, fine. But 1 of 2 of them really did like number 9 because they liked the expression in their hands. So that was the expression that they were going to try and use in their next writing. There is actually a paraphrasing tool, which is free, called Quillbot, if you're interested. Quillbot can do many paraphrasing things. So for example, I take a phrase from a text from the course book. For example, here it's underlined in blue. Can you see? It's the complex nature of human beings' relationship with their work. That's my sentence. And I ask Quillbot to paraphrase it in 3 different ways. This is what it said. So then obviously in class, we look at what it generated and we look at, it says, intricate connection between, intricate nature of, intricate link between. Okay, so we look at those and then students choose one of them to use in their next homework assignment, the one they like best. I mentioned at the beginning of the session that we were going to do some ideas for working on writing part 1. Writing part 1 is this looking, summarizing and evaluating key points of 2 texts, which are about the same subject with different points of view. And I don't know whether you noticed before, but it has to be 240 to 280 words long. That's a lot of words. I don't know about you, but my proficiency students, they're busy. They have a lot of work to do. Writing is usually a bit of a chore. It's a bit difficult. They don't really want to do it. And getting them to produce something that's this long is kind of a very hard task. It's an uphill fight. That's for them. And to be honest, for me as a teacher, marking all those hugely long compositions is not much fun either. So I think what works well at C2 level is to think of ways to write part of compositions, and then you can do it in class. Here's a model answer from the course book. And let me tell you what I do with this to produce a composition. I split my students into 2 groups, A and B. I give everybody the beginning of the model answer, the introduction, and I give everybody the conclusion. Then group A writes a summary and evaluation paragraph. That's all they're writing about text 1. Group B writes the summary and evaluation of text 2. Then, so everybody's written a paragraph, no more. And then I put one student A with one B together, and they have a complete composition now. Okay, so you have a complete composition. What do we do? Well, then we take the original model from the course book and what they wrote, and we compare them. We look at the similarities and the differences between what my students produced in those 2 paragraphs and the course book model. And this, I think, for me and for my students, is far more useful than slaving trying to produce 280 words of the whole thing. It's much easier for everybody. You can do writing in class this way, not just always for homework, by writing part. The course book, this is another example of a report, a model answer that's given in the course book. What you can also do then is, if you put the same title into AI and the maximum number of words and tell it that it's CEFR C2 level, it will generate its own composition answer. So then, again, instead of asking my students to produce the whole thing, all I ask them to do is compare. Compare the content and organization of the coursebook model with what AI produced. Look at the 2 of them and see which one you like better, which one has a better organization, which one has the content more better expressed. And finally, my students will often say to me, how do we know that what we're writing is C2 level? Because I say to them, now use some C2 level vocabulary in your writing, make sure that it's up there, you're using what we're seeing in class and what you're keeping in your notebooks, use that vocabulary. And they say, well, I don't know whether this is good enough or not. So I find a useful exercise to do is to get the previous level model composition. So for example, this one I'm going to show you is a review from the advanced handbook, C1 level. You don't have to read it, it's a lot of text. We look at the review and decide how to make it C2 level. So, and again, don't worry about reading it. What they do is they think about, okay, what does it need? They think about it in terms of content, communicative achievement, organization, and language. All the areas that they are marked on, they think about those, and they might add, well, okay, we need to add some paragraphs, we need to change the order of things and cut out some bits and add some other bits. We need to work on, for example, paraphrasing that. It's not good enough. We need to look at this sentence and add a different linker. And so they work on it. We work on it in groups or as a whole group with the whole class. It doesn't matter which way you do it. But you end up with something like this, which is just a text with lots of writing on it, where students have marked the paragraphs, they've suggested more C2 level linking words, they've put in synonyms and paraphrased and tried to improve it actively. And then they can really see what it means to have something from C1 that now is C2 level. So basically, I would say, yes, let's be fearless in the face of C2 excellence, but never forget the course book, the teacher's book. Take it with you wherever you go. Yeah? So I hope you enjoyed the ideas that we've just been through there for your C2 classes in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was lovely when you said machine against a machine. I felt like it was Terminator time. All right, thank you. Well, yeah, many people have asked, like, what is C2? How do I get to C2? Does it work? Is it worth? Or no? It's like so many people are like, oh, maybe C1 is just what I need, no? Or what I need.
C1 is enough, but C2 is just that level above everybody else. I mean, there are very few people who actually get to that level. It's such a great achievement, and the students are so good. But C1 is also an academic qualification, and it's usually enough. But certainly, if you want to stand out, C2 is something necessary. Unnecessary.
And it's good that it's not 12-hour exam.
Thank goodness, no, just 4. That's enough, yes.
Yeah, more than enough. There's a question here in the Q&A. William says, regarding expository essays, to what extent do you push the traditional 4 to 5 paragraph structure versus guiding learners to effectively break writing rules and be creative? Are you restricted by requirements of the curriculum, or do you more or less have license? Also, could you share your thoughts on the use of rhetorical questions? Very long question.
That's a big question. Right. Well, first of all, my immediate answer in the traditional structure versus break the rules and be creative. Cambridge have said that, and I know because we've had training from a Cambridge writing assessor. Cambridge have said that if a student takes risks, they will be given credit for taking risks, even if they make a mistake. So therefore, I would, yes, encourage my students to be creative, particularly at this very high level, definitely. And as to the other part of the question, use of rhetorical questions, well, I mean, it just depends on whether they work in the context of the composition that the student's writing. And if they do, absolutely, go for it.
I've always wondered if I can reach my C2 in Spanish.
Yeah. Yeah.
It would be hard. Probably. All right. There's another question. I'm not sure about if it's about this part of the session or not, but well, maybe we can answer this one. From Fatma, thank you for the formative presentation. My question is, do you think that the use of artificial intelligence tools could actually lower our creativity as teachers?
I think it can make our lives a lot easier. For example, what I was saying there about thinking up how to paraphrase a sentence at C2 level is like, whoa, that's really hard. So no, it enables us, I think, to get things done quicker. It gives us ideas and allows us perhaps to be even more creative, because it gives us the ideas and you think, oh, okay, I'm going to have a go at that.
It gives you ideas, right?
Yeah, it encourages creativity, I think.
If you use it wisely, if you don't let the AI to do like kind of everything, of course not.
Yeah, it's another tool that we have at our disposal.
I remember something happened with Wikipedia. I don't know if you remember, like everybody was doing homework from Wikipedia when it went live, right? But then we teachers needed to do some strategies in order to for students to do something different, no? to retell the story or to explain something about any homework. And it's kind of the same here with artificial intelligence. Can give you and provide a lot of information, a lot of ideas, but then how are you going to apply it? How are you going to, no?
Yeah, but in the classroom. And let's face it, it's part of our lives. It's not going to go away. So we may as well embrace it and learn how to use it effectively, sparingly, as a tool, another tool that we have, as opposed to running away from it, because it's not going to go away.
All right. Thank you very much, Esther, for your presentation.
You're welcome.
It was wonderful.
You very much.
I'm not going to ask you what time it is there.
Yeah, oh, it's late. Yes, very late.
Pretty late.
Time to bed.
Thank you very much. I think that
okay.
For you to go to bed. Thank you. It was lovely having you here. And
thanks,
well, and before everybody leaves, what about look at Ready for C2, right? If you want to get more information on this level, remember that we also have B1 first and also C1 advanced, and now we have Ready for. And let me tell you also that this is the 4th edition of the very, very famous bestseller Ready for. So probably you use Ready for 1st edition. Well, guess what? We have the 4th edition, and now we have the complete set with the B2, the C1 and C2, right? So if you want more information, please scan the QR code, and you're going to have more and more information about it.